Okay, Team MIT Sloan, take it away.
Great, thank you. So good day, everyone. My name is Nick Vinalinas, and it's my pleasure to introduce our team representing the MIT Sloan School of Management. We'll be presenting GLASS, our blockchain-based solution to improve donation transparency, speed, and efficiency for the hurricane-ravaged island of Puerto Rico. We will walk you through the global problems with disaster aid, the impact that hurricanes have had on the resiliency of the people of Puerto Rico, our methodology for root cause identification, a walkthrough of our solution, including a demonstration, how our solution addresses those root causes, and discussion of feasibility as well as implementation.
Poor NGO efficiency and transparency.
Okay, sorry. Poor NGO efficiency and transparency leads to low donor sentiment. The perception of transparency in nonprofit organizations is the point that we want to address. While charitable donations were nearly 145 billion during the pandemic, the perception of transparency has declined significantly over the time. From the studies, we can say that at least 73% think that trustworthiness is an important factor for donation, yet only 51% of the people really trust charities. The lack of transparency combined with the lack of coordination ends in many middlemen and with a long delayed aid due to bureaucracy. Case of Puerto Rico. 4 years after Maria, Puerto Rico is far from recovery. After this world record hurricane, we can see until today prolonged power outages, lack of access to food and clean water, and rain roads. Puerto Rico relies heavily in US support, but 71% of federal aid have not reached communities, reinforcing the needs of NGOs to help the multiple allies community organizations that are not now struggling with the long waiting time and for federal aid and humanitarian aid.
We utilize a causal loop diagram to identify the causes of poor resiliency and begin to identify opportunities for improvement. Ultimately, low transparency and willingness to donate results in greater administrative expenditures to raise funds, lowering efficiency and total dollars in aid for spending on prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. In Puerto Rico, where substantial challenges already exist, including recurrent power outages, lack of access to food and clean water, and impassable roads, the difference between their need and funds available is large and growing with each passing day a new hurricane. This results in lower resiliency, only further increasing the need gap, representing a reinforcing loop that must be balanced or converted to start reinforcing positive change. Slow fund delivery and increasing severity of disasters also work to increase the need gap. While we can't change the damage that has already occurred and cause these gaps, we can implement feedback mechanisms that don't exist today to act on the root causes of low transparency, slow donor response, slow speed of funds delivery, and rising administrative costs.
And to bridge the gap to this problem, we came up with a novel technology-backed solution that will transform the way that people perceive donations. And we call this platform GLASS. GLASS improves the way Puerto Rico's ability to respond and prepare to complex disasters such as hurricanes. GLASS is an app-based platform ecosystem between aid organizations and donors with the purpose of creating complete transparency and traceability of donations throughout the entire value chain. This makes it possible for users to track, first of all, the efficiency of NGOs, meaning the percentage of donations directly allocated to disaster aid, the category of donations across different categories, such as medical aid, food and water, infrastructure and shelter, and also the time of deployment from the donation, meaning the time from the donation until it's actually received by local vendors. This allows users not only to track their personal donation, but also to select the most appropriate charity based on their personal preference, which is analyzed also by a personal assistant in the app, including the ability to split the donation between several different organizations. And thereby, we rely on two key pillars: simplicity and efficiency, and security and transparency. The application is entirely platform-based, which is provided by Glass, allowing a seamless integration of charities and donors alike. Donations and transactions are made in local currency and are then subsequently tracked and analyzed throughout the blockchain technology. Also, blockchain makes transactions extremely secure and entirely transparent. By using algorithmic technology, which is the backbone of Glass, it helps us to achieve security, a visual representation of flow funds, reduction in transfer times, and transaction fees. And the user journey is very straightforward. The user selects charities based on preferences on the local disaster, and a donation of your choice is done in a local currency. Here, the donation is linked to a blockchain string on the platform, which charities are also linked to. They internally allocated to departments and 8 categories, where before spending it with local vendors, the money is decoupled from the blockchain string to make it a smooth transaction. We run you through a quick demonstration of our app that we have created. So we see a dashboard of the personalized site where you can see how much I've spent, the efficiency, a personal donation split, such as also an overview of trending and popular NGOs. If we then switch to the donation side here on the menu, we can see the different hurricanes, the different charities that are pre-selected here, selected by medical aid, and a way to directly donate money. We can also go to the hurricane overview where you see how much money has been funded for the specific hurricane, the overview generally, and also the biggest needs. If I want to have a personalized assessment, we can run you through the assistant a couple of questions which are asked to analyze your profile, how you like to donate money, your preference, and in the end, as we see in a couple of seconds, a profile is created, giving your profile and some suggested organizations. If we're unsure about a certain organization, we can of course also go to this overview, the average performance in general, and the one below specific to a certain hurricane. And in the end, we have a user profile, which again gives you an overview and some sort of reward and risk-taking abilities.
So revisiting our causal loop diagram, we can see how real-time information and active donor involvement facilitated by Glass provides an essential correction to a system that otherwise may lead to worsening of Puerto Rican resiliency. Increased transparency will improve donor willingness, both quantity of donors and amount they donate, will result in faster feedback between information on NGO efficiency and change to donor behavior versus once-a-year reports, if that, lower overall costs and waste, and ultimately result in more money faster in the communities that need it. That will result in improved preparedness for the next disaster, even better response by Puerto Ricans in both urban and rural areas, and create reinforcing loops in favor of improved resiliency.
Now into the technological part of our presentation. One of the key elements around the feasibility of our project is the implementation of the blockchain technology. Because of this, we chose Algorand, founded in 2017 by one of MIT's faculty, Silvio Micali, and currently one of the top 20 cryptocurrencies in terms of market cap. The Algorand vision is to create and exchange value efficiently, transparently, and securely. So you can see how this aligned with the goals we have for our Glass platform. The network has its own ecosystem with development tools, apps, smart contracts, and APIs, and secure wallets for different cryptocurrencies. This has given us immediate access to a talented community with an aligned vision. We also created a technological roadmap for the application, starting with operating models and governance, all the way to the public launch. And to wrap up our presentation, we have our implementation strategy, starting with the user interface that Keanu showed, combined with the back-end blockchain technological work. Aligned with our brand, we have put together and talked to several small and medium-sized NGOs in Puerto Rico And after beta testing our platform with them and starting with marketing development, we can be ready for a broader public release. Finally, hurricanes in Puerto Rico are just the beginning. Glass is a global solution for many global problems. I cannot imagine a better team to accomplish this than the team from the MIT Sloan Global Programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Team MIT Sloan. I am going to now pass the judging Q&A off to Gyeonggi and the rest of the judges.
Thank you so much. I presume you're really focusing now on the individuals donating anything to charity instead of like the big institutional donors and so forth. There is, of course, a lot in donor relations and donor relation management to be solved, and there are lots of issues, and there are lots of blockchain solutions already existing in this space. But what I would be actually even more interested in is that what's the role of the community here, and which community's problem did you actually solve? How did they feed into all of this?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that last part of the question? I had a hard time understanding.
Well, see, when we wrote the challenge, the main issue was find the problem of your community and try to solve the problem. So which community did you here talk to, and how does it solve their problem?
So I could speak to the first part of that, and I'll turn over to Valentina. So specifically, we were looking at the rural communities of Puerto Rico. So not one town in particular, but mainly the rural communities surrounding San Juan in particular. So one thing that our research showed was, despite Puerto Rico being a US territory, and despite even rural communities close to a city should be able to respond more quickly to hurricanes, should be able to be more prepared for them, they fared just as worse as the rest of rural Puerto Rico. And so when we look at some of the greatest needs, even just clean water was one of the biggest ones, or early access to food. And so what we think this will help solve is by connecting to the local vendors that can provide both food and water, for instance, and provide transparency. We think that the grassroots donations from the United States or others, which maybe isn't the target as you mentioned earlier, donor relations, maybe for larger donors. And while we think that's very important, our starting point was really the grassroots donations and making sure that they make it through to the local vendors that can support those rural communities around large cities such as San Juan. So Valentina.
Also, we want to address the middle-sized and the small-sized community arrangement organizations. So I think this platform gives them more visibility of what they're doing and transparency, because donors can know how much of their money is going to be spent in what issue. So that's what I would say also.
Thank you for this. If I can follow up on the question that Gyeonggi asked. So thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. I just have a question maybe related to what has already been asked, which is there capacity within the system that you have set up for the voice of the beneficiary to become one that is heard? Because one of the biggest issues that we have in the humanitarian sectors, yes, there are transparency issues, but we don't even know even if the money is spent efficiently, it's actually addressing the needs of the beneficiaries in the way that they would like to be. So as you have this almost end-to-end visibility, can it go all the way up to those beneficiaries so that they can become active participants in deciding what is good for them, and maybe educating the donors on the other end? Like if they are focusing on shelter and it's not exactly what those people want, it can help with the problem of NGOs who sort of present what they know NGOs want in order to get the funding. But we still don't know if it's reaching the beneficiaries and hitting exactly their needs.
Maybe I can take this question. So what we've been thinking about are probably 2 points. One is like a community building setting where actively the NGOs, the local NGOs, can engage with the donor community. This is one way that we've been trying to figure out how it would essentially work or what would be possible. I'm just trying to figure out to go to this page when we go to the assessment. Here on this page, basically, every NGO has the possibility to, first of all, showcase their average performance and their historical performance, which is based on previous data. But also very important, if we go to the overview of the hurricane, that a similar resource need they can showcase. Each NGO has the possibility to say, okay, our focus historically is on shelter. We are a NGO that is primarily focusing on shelter, medical aid, as we can see here in the split. 82% of their money, they're usually, or in this case for Hurricane Grace, funded for medical aid, 10% for food and water, 5% for shelter, 3% for infrastructure. So this gives them kind of a voice to say in this specific, this is the need where we plan to allocate the money. And second of all, there is an overview of generally the need in a broader setting of local communities. I think there will not be an issue of a voice for NGOs on a statistical side so that they can showcase what is the need, what they've previously spent money on. What we're trying to figure out is a direct interaction way to build kind of a community. Let's say that the 5 people of us donated to this charity for Hurricane Grace, that we kind of create a community around where the NGO can interact with those people. Because again, blockchain, our view on blockchain, why we're using it, is not because of cryptocurrency, but rather of a smart contract. It gives you a string and an access that we can trace. You have donated to this charity for this hurricane, and this is where we could potentially build a community around.
If I can jump in here, so the notion of transparency is not necessarily unique to the third sector. I suppose there's greater challenges within the private sector when it comes to transparency. So I was quite interested in how it is that you link the efficiency of spending money to the success of an organization, a non-governmental organization. I didn't quite get the sense of you speaking to efficiency in terms of meeting its social mission and how that ties up to the efficiency of spend. And then just as a practitioner, I've worked in these organizations for over 2 decades. So to ask the question and coming off from what Nani was speaking about, just as a practitioner, you know, one, this is technology based, and we're talking about the possibility of infrastructure being affected by a natural phenomenon. So what happens when all of the technology pretty much gets cut off because of a hurricane? And then 2, you know, how cumbersome does this become for me as a non-governmental organization worker to try and allocate the spend through the technology, when I assume if I was to bring this here to South Africa, many organizations tend to be still on a book, sort of a keeping system. So there's a couple of things there that if you could respond to.
So I think I take a couple parts of that. So I think when talking about efficiency, what GLASS is accomplishing ultimately is if the NGOs for their administrative resources or needs, if they want any dollars allocated back to them, and ultimately they are the end recipient, then that is something we're tracking. We're not I don't think GLASS is inherently making them more efficient. It is just recording the flow of funds to each end use, and then ultimately make sure that's reported back. So what we think ends up being the pressure on efficiency for them is the fact that the donors are actually seeing this in real time. And if, you know, a particular NGO, say UNICEF, you know, has, you know, much more being allocated towards administration than say another NGO, we're hoping that that real-time information will inspire donors to say, hey, we We see the American Red Cross is much more efficient here. They have a much lower percentage going to administration. You know, we'd like to, you know, start pushing our donations that way. I think as far as to your point on, you know, in a hurricane, of course, there are infrastructure challenges. Actually, Puerto Rico's infrastructure challenges we mentioned pre-hurricane. So certainly post-hurricane, even worse. And I think that's where, to go back, Keanu had a slide that showed when you decouple from the blockchain. Certainly we know that, you know, even in the absolute best of scenarios, even with perfectly working infrastructure, at some point you have to deconnect from the blockchain. And that's where, you know, the end of the technology stops, and ultimately you just have funds and local currency that's being exchanged for goods and services. You know, I think every disaster is going to be different. Certainly some might be more severe than others, and perhaps in Puerto Rico or anywhere where this is utilized, maybe the major cities still have, you know, cell tower access on a limited basis. You know, we're utilizing a technology that we don't believe would have tremendous bandwidth challenges. And ideally, we'd be working with local governments to make sure something like this is prioritized from a bandwidth standpoint in a disaster, because it is directly related to aid. But ultimately, you know, once you have that decoupling, maybe that occurs, you know, in rural towns, probably unlikely in a severe disaster, more likely in those major cities. And I think that's a development opportunity for us, because since the blockchain is ultimately security, it's only as good as, you know, that point on. And so in our paper, we address some, you know, of those development opportunities and challenges we still have to work through is, you know, not just the transparency after it's decoupled, but, you know, opportunities for corruption or other types of waste. And so we think that, you know, as our solution takes off, vendors will be incentivized because they want access to those donations, either for commercial reasons or, you know, hopefully humanitarian reasons. But, you know, as they want to become part of this ecosystem, you know, more and more will good actors will hopefully join the platform, leaving maybe some of the bad actors, you know, off. And so that way, you know, in situations where you do have that lack of blockchain, you've already kind of filtered out some of the best actors in the area.
Can I just jump in on that? Because I mean, one of the things that Armand was really highlighting here, and this is a really important issue about, you know, why do you have even admin costs, and what are the layers of admin costs? One of the biggest is reporting requirements. So you're adding a layer on reporting requirements, which will raise the admin costs of every single NGO that will participate. There is another layer of admin costs, and that is all the preparedness activities, pre-positioning activities, anything that makes an NGO quicker in responding to disasters, more effective and better in responding to disasters. How could you maybe put these things back in and educate donors about it? Okay, higher admin cost is not necessarily worse. It could sometimes be better.
So I think they could definitely be a part of the ongoing development of our platform. I mean, I think that ultimately, while there's benefits that come in of admin costs, I don't think we're seeing that all administrative costs are waste or are unnecessary. But we still think that is, at least, you know, in the United States and some of the other countries that we looked at, that is still one of the largest reasons why people do not want to donate. There's an emotional reaction to, well, you know, 40 cents of my dollar or 20 cents of my dollar is going towards, you know, someone's salary rather than to water or to medical supplies or whatever. So I think there's a couple components to it. Certainly, you know, education on what is the value of that administration, but then ultimately also looking at the statistics on, you know, what is the average? What's the standard deviation of that? And we believe that our platform will, at the very least, identify them the outliers. So maybe, you know, a charity that's well known, and not to pick on the American Red Cross, but, you know, maybe if they have a much higher administrative cost than, say, UNICEF, it's possible that could be they're providing more value. Or if they're so far away from the mean, it could also be because for this particular disaster, and it gets back to what Kiana showed before, on an individual basis, for this particular disaster, based upon the resources and processes they have, they're just not getting as many dollars to those in need as the next best charity.
Also, maybe adding on this point, I disagree with the additional layer of administrative cost given our platform. We are planning to launch this as a standalone platform, easily integratable to the charity. Meaning, when you allocate in-app or in-platform to different departments, different aids, given the blockchain technology, it is automatically back recorded. So there is no need for this. Actually it reduces these costs of bookkeeping recording, because as you do it in the app automatically until the last node, when you actually spend it to local vendors, is automatically back recorded. And that's actually the logic of a blockchain string.
So I know we've been focusing some other questions on the NGO side of it, but I also want to look at this from the perspective of the donor. And so while you're focusing on the transparency piece, I'm curious to see if you've given some thoughts to the convenience, because what I'm starting to see a lot of solutions out there is, you go to the grocery store and they say, do you want to pay an extra $1 to go to this charity? Or when there's a natural disaster, you may see a text this number to give. If I'm to understand this correctly, part of your platform is going to require the individuals to download an app and then do a little bit more work to ensure it's getting somewhere else. How do you plan to promote this to encourage more donors just at its own onset, let alone trying to get to the transparency phase?
I think we have to develop the dimensions of how we are going to market this, but I think there's a point that nobody have addressed yet, that having your own resume of what you are spending in donations, and also your own profile, maybe we can do something for a social media linked, so you can, like, I don't know, break that I did give this to this community and blah blah blah. Do some marketing in that area. Of course, we need to develop the marketing part, but I feel like having your own profile and you can see how much you have spent and whatever, I think is a good place to start to engage people and making more donations.
Yes, and we're also focusing on a demographic that is the demographic that is currently feeling like the willingness to donate is going a lot down than the other demographic that are used to, like the older people. So it's a demographic that is going to be, we're going to show this platform, we're going to market this platform, Valentina is saying, and we want to attract the donor that is not usually a donor. So we're trying to get more people into donating, and we're obviously blockchain helps to bring more people, because there's a lot of people that are really in love with the technology, and of course there's all these technological aspect, but we cannot hide the fact that blockchain right now is really popular, and a lot of people that are inside of the platform that are with this demographic I mentioned it could be willing to donate if they understand the technology and know that transparency and security is going to be way better.
Maybe a quick point to add on this. I'd agree with Courtney that there might be a bigger barrier to download the app, so it's an extra step. But what we are not trying to do is remove a barrier to donate, but rather to increase the incentives to donate. That the people see an active and a better transparency of what impact and what purpose they can have. They can interact with NGOs. They see where the money is going. They can see on a local resiliency problem where they can have an impact. So it's rather of increasing the incentive rather than removing a barrier to just give away some cents when spending in a supermarket. Just a minor point for my.
Can we go back to the slide which explains when the blockchain starts and then when it ends? Because I think that there is an important point there, and I can't remember that's which exactly. Linkage to blockchain and decoupling from blockchain. I think that what you're showing over here is that blockchain is a technical solution for certain problems, but not necessarily for the problems we've been discussing, or essentially the value proposition you've articulated. I think that We spoke about the efficiency in terms of distribution at the ultimate beneficiary level, and that's the spend part. And now we're talking about the value proposition in terms of increasing the volume of donation or bringing new donors to the charitable universe, and that's on the selection part. So I think that I would love for you to go back and rethink about what blockchain actually, which problem does blockchain solve? I think that there is a question to always ask, which is, and some people have said blockchain is a solution in search of problems. And I know this is unfair, but I think that I was looking at the company's website or whatever kind of profile on LinkedIn, and it's very clear that essentially it's focusing on efficiencies in terms of high volume transactions within the financial markets. You may want to go back to the design table in terms of how that can be useful in an environment where it's about human contact, it's about human motivation, it's about efficiency at the volunteer level and so on. So anyway, I'll stop here. And I apologize for maybe kind of exhausting the time left for us.
No, don't worry. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the comments. I don't know if anyone has another question.
I must say that from our point of view, blockchain is really not the center. I really agree with what you said before. Blockchain is not the center of our application. It's rather the tool to facilitate. And the value proposition that we can provide is transparency on real-time and live data. So that when you are donating, you actually see where the money is going and what is the need, where is the biggest need, and how can I help? So that in our point of view, the technology must not or cannot be the center to incentivize people to spend. That's why we also don't encourage people to spend with cryptocurrencies rather than in local currency. So it's really just a technology that facilitates a visual transparency and incentivize people because they have a bigger trust, a bigger willingness to donate. Just my 2 cents.
So if I may then come back, I think that the interesting thing, I would say donor apps are not new. I think that I'm sure you're aware, you've done research, you've looked at something called global giving, which was started 20 years ago by Marie Qureshi and Dennis Whittle, some of my former World Bank colleagues, and I'm sure there are others. Interestingly enough, it would probably be useful to look at how what that technology would bring to existing donor platforms. And I think that might actually be the direction in which you want to look going forward.
That is a good point.
Okay, I think we are out of time, but the judges have received all of your information, and I'm sure that in the comment section they can provide additional questions. Thank you so much for your time today. I will be in touch next week regarding setting up mentoring sessions with one or a couple of our judges, and we will be posting this on YouTube, and we will be sending you an invitation to the November 17th event where we will be announcing live the winning team. Thank you all for all of your time, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.